All right, Matt, what's your level of overall concern for the Bears now 2 weeks in?
It's just the lack of execution on the offensive side of the football, Dan. I think it's where you really have to start. You can look at a number of things here. Obviously, one of the top narratives is pass protection. We understand that has to get better. Their inability to create any run game efficiency, that has to change. Pre-snap penalties, can't have them. Can't have them in a game against Houston, a playoff team, where you win. At the end of the game, you look up, and this is the thing that got me, Dan. You watched that football game, and it felt like Houston was in complete control, right? You look up at the end of the game, it's 19-13. You got the ball left in a 2-minute situation. Okay, so that's how close you are. And right now you're close because your defense and your special teams are playing at a playoff-type level, putting you in a position to compete and to win football games every week. But until you get more consistent production, until you can start to create explosive plays in the passing game and the offensive side of the football, it's going to be tough to win those games.
Matt, that's kind of what we expected, though, right? Coming into the season, we knew the defense was going to lead the charge and the offense was going to have to play catch-up because you had a rookie quarterback and some questions, especially on the offensive line. Do you feel like they're that far away from being where we thought they actually would be in terms of development and playing the type of football that we need to see them play on all sides of the ball?
I think from an offense perspective, they're much further away than I anticipated. Okay. Just based off the reports from training camp, the flashes you saw in the preseason. Obviously, this preseason football doesn't count, but you still saw flashes of what they could be. The number one thing for me is the run game. And right now, they're a very zone-heavy run team. They're getting beat across their face on reach blocks. They're not creating movement up front. They're losing one-on-ones. What does that do to the running back? Now the running back starts to press. Instead of attacking daylight, getting north-south of the football, they start to bend or to bounce the football. And that's what you're seeing a lot with DeAndre Swift. Getting the ball and bouncing it outside to the edges. It's hard to do in the NFL. Very hard to do because they're going to cut off the football. They're going to set an edge. It's what good defenses do, like the Houston Texans. And I looked at the numbers today. Obviously, you can look at the total pass attempts from Caleb Williams, but he dropped back 48 times. 48 times, guys. That's a lot to ask for a young quarterback, especially against that style of defense. And look what DeMeco Ryans in Houston did. They started to dial up the heat. They gave a lot of different fronts for the Bears pass protection, loaded fronts, even fronts. So they're dropping guys into coverage. A lot of twist and movement up front. They really threw a lot at Caleb Williams. So when they're doing that to a young quarterback, if you can't counter that with the run game and allow him to relax it a little bit, this is what happens. This is what it turns into. And you see an offense that's absolutely disjointed in the pass game, cannot get the football down the field, and cannot extend drives because there's just too much pressure on the quarterback.
Tim Jenkins was on yesterday, and we were talking about the proliferation of two-deep looks. And I know you had mentioned that for the Monday night game, whether it's two-man, whether it is classic zone Tampa 2, or whether it ends up becoming effective quarters coverage, the umbrella on the defense has stifled passing numbers.
Yep.
What Tim Jenkins yesterday suggested was, okay, force them out of it. To get some personnel going, get some big people on the field, and force them to have to bring a safety down. And then when you get those looks, if you show similar formations, make the passes off of that, it sounds great. How hard is it to do?
It's hard to be patient from an offensive perspective, right? And that's what it requires, a lot of patience. That we're going to run the football. We're going to take the underneath throws. We're going to throw we're going to take the throws of the flat, throw the stick routes, throw the hitch routes. Continue to move the ball down the field. Well, eventually, offensive play callers become impatient. And I remember my first year in St. Louis when Lovie Smith was our defensive coordinator. He gave us this speech that they will become impatient. They will get an offensive penalty, which puts them behind the sticks. They will get a third and long. And when they absolutely become impatient, they will force the ball down the field, and that's when we are going to take it away. That's kind of the theory behind playing two deep coverage. Yes, you can take away vertical shots, but also – it kind of forces offenses to play at your tempo, correct? And that's what teams are doing. But, Dan, this is a big topic this week, too high coverage. Too high coverage has been around forever, guys. This isn't something new. It's been around since the beginning of time in football. There are ways to beat it.
I was just going to say, what happened to an offensive coordinator seeing that and saying, all right, we're going to run all verticals?
Right. I mean, but there's ways to beat it, right? You can run the corner routes to put the corner in conflict. You can run the seam routes. You can run the deep end breakers. What do those take, though? They take protection. that take a quarterback that's willing to hang in the pocket and a quarterback that can anticipate when to deliver the ball and when that zone void is going to open up. But there are answers to it in the passing game. There are. What we're seeing right now around the league, a lot of coaches are throwing the ball underneath. They're willing to throw wide receiver screens that we see on Friday nights at the high school level. The Bears threw too many wide receiver screens the other night. Way too many, in my opinion. Because this is NFL talent out there that has speed, that is going to play with the proper leverage, that is going to cut off the football. And those wide receiver screens, sometimes they go. Sometimes DeAndre Swift can make a play off it. Sometimes DJ Moore can make a play off because they are so talented. But wide receiver screens, to me, are not the answer. They are not the answer. The Bears have to develop more answers. Another thing they need to do is more play action with their young quarterback. I want to see him more in the center. Through 2 games, he's got 12 play action attempts. That's it. 12. That number needs to be higher, in my opinion. Because think about the numbers here, Dan. I looked at him today on 3rd down right now. Caleb Williams is 7 of 17. He's averaging 4.2 yards per attempt. Versus pressure, he is 7 of 18, averaging only 2.9 yards per attempt. 2.9. Okay, so a lot of underneath throws, which I understand. Dan, we talked about this last week, right? Give him some easy throws. Build his confidence early in the football game. I agree with that. But eventually, you have to have a much more aggressive throwing mentality with your quarterback and your offensive play calling. Because until they start creating explosive plays, you can't keep going to your defense and say, hey, you got to win the game for us again. Got to win the game for us again. Or you got to make a play on special teams for us again. And look, that's, like I said, that's why they're in games right now. But imagine if you complement that with an offense that can score points, that can move the ball, that can threaten vertically, that can produce after the catch. The only explosive play throw they have right now through 2 weeks was Roma Dunze catching a curl route in the 2-minute drill the other day and breaking a tackle. That is it. That is the only completion they have over 20 yards.
Yeah.
Tough to see.
And you take that and couple it with that pass interference that got them on the doorstep to score their only offensive touchdown. And it kind of speaks to where they are. You mentioned the under center thing, and I'm just curious from, you talk about patience, we talk about guys coaching being stubborn and wanting to do what they want to do. How long does it take to make those types of changes that you're talking about, where you're able to get under center more often and set up play action? Is that like a philosophical thing in your mind, or is that something that can be adjusted quicker rather than not?
I think it can be adjusted today in practice this afternoon, right? That's what I'm doing if I'm a coach. There's 2 things I would change. One, we can't move people in the zone run game. Let's go more gap or power. Let's go more gap or power. Let's give our roadmap to our running backs, a defined path to go downhill.
Let's take a step back here real quick. When we talk about power, I don't know that everybody understands what that means. When we talk about running downhill, that doesn't just mean successful running. The power game or the downhill game means changing the numbers by bringing somebody from one side of the formation to the other.
Yes, and a lot of time it is a double team at the point of attack, and you are pulling someone. You are pulling a backside guard or even a backside tackle, okay? I think that would help this run game up front, but also help the play action passing game. Because what do linebackers read? They read guard pull to near back. So when that guard goes, the linebacker goes too, correct? There's your void. Now you throw a quick inside glance route. Now you throw the end breaker. Now you have a window, a defined window for the quarterback when he comes off a play action, hit the back foot and drive the football. Now we're creating explosive plays. Now we're moving the ball in the pass game. I just think it's an option. It's an answer, because when you watch the tape right now, guys, it's simply not good enough. I'm sorry, it's not. The interior of the offensive line is not good enough either. So you have to decide what you want to do from the schematic perspective, or are you bringing in offensive guards and center on Tuesdays in Haugh and working them out as eventual replacements?
That sounds not desperate, but yeah, desperate.
But Marshall is pro football.
Yeah.
Right? We're not talking about 9U team here. We're not. I've been around 9U team. This is not 9U football. This is professional football where you just drafted the quarterback number 1 overall. Things have to improve. Things have to get better. I know it's so early in the season. And look, NFL teams themselves are trying to figure out what they really are on both sides of the football. What the Bears are doing right now is simply not good enough. Through 2 games to have these level of numbers that are so low comparable to the rest of the league.
Anything surprising you, because we mentioned the defense, at just how well they're playing? Have there been anything that tells you that they're playing maybe above what even we expected? Because some people had this as, potentially top 10, maybe top 5 defense, and they've certainly come to play the first 2 weeks.
They have, Marshall. I agree with that. But I'm not surprised based on what they did the second half of last season. You know, you go into Houston against a playoff team and hold them to 19 points. That's good football. And look, Nico Collins made some plays. He's going to make plays every week. That's how this league works. You're not going to totally eliminate an offense anymore in the NFL. But their style of play fits with the modern NFL. They can play too deep. They can play zone. They can mix in their man and zone pressures. They have edge rushers that are getting home. They have excellent speed and pursuit in the second level. And I think the secondary, like I said last year, is still the strength of this football team because of their versatility, because of the physical style they play with. And they put themselves in a position to take the football away. When you get that style of defense in today's league, you're going to be in position to win games. And then what they can do on special teams, because special teams to me is an extension of the defense. And how they're playing in the kicking game, that helps enormously as well too. So that's why we keep going back to this offense, because if they can play at a level we anticipate them to play, then this is a really strong football team.
When you mentioned the kicking game, let me sort of overlay that with the Lovie Smith concept of patience and what you used to understand what the length of the effective length of the field was. That this is how far they're going to try to drive against us. This will give us X number of opportunities to dictate the play, to try to cause a turnover. When the average field goal, it's almost like velocity in baseball changing everything. When the average field goal distance has increased and the expectation for what is a routine kick has changed so dramatically, doesn't that alter the math of a cover two team? And because you're going to have fewer opportunities and they just don't have to go as far to score.
They don't. And I think that, to your point, Dan, it really impacts third downs when you get to like the minus 40-yard line. So that means you're, before half field. When you get to that point of the field, you understand that you get a 15, 20-yard throw, they can kick it and they can make it, right? So I think that does alter what you do. I like cover two when you're backed up. I like cover two in the high red zone because you can force throws underneath and tackle. But when you get to the middle range of the football field, you have to understand that if you play cover two, they throw the ball underneath twice and you tackle, they're still going to set up and kick a field goal. So those situations, especially third downs, I think you need to be more man heavy and more pressure heavy because, to your point, Dan, of what people can do right now in terms of making field goals.
With the way, when we've talked about it, the passing numbers are way down. Is that something you expect to continue? I know you could say, hey, it's just week one, but now it's week one and week two, and it may soon be week 1 through 3 with the way things have gone so far. Or do you expect eventually this season for those passing numbers to get back to somewhere around what the mean has been over the last 5-10 years?
Marshall, I think the numbers will elevate over time. We are still early in September. Not a lot of quarterbacks play in August anymore. That's part of it too. You don't get many reps. They don't play in the preseason. Practice structure is much different than someone like when I played in my era, much different. You don't have the same amount of practice time. So I think there is a developmental process for every offense early in September. And like we were just talking about, teams are not going to get away from playing cover two and playing quarters and playing two-man. Why would they? Why would they change? Now, there are teams that are more aggressive, more man-heavy, more pressure-heavy. But why would you change what you are? And offenses have to find answers. And they do. And I think the run game is going to become a big part of a lot of the top offenses in the NFL this year because of what we were just talking about earlier. Forcing them to be patient. Not having an extra safety down to cut off the football on the edge. Simple things like that can dictate what you have to do now from an offensive perspective. And that means running the football. That means being more methodical on offense. That also means not scoring as much points. And you're seeing that right now. The scoring is down as well because of the style of football being played.
We have 2 games this year for Gervon Dexter. He has 2 sacks. He has 3 solo tackles. He has 3 quarterback hits. We had him circled as one of the big and important spots for growth on this defense. And while Andrew Billings, interestingly, it's not usually supposed to be this way, that the 0, the 1, the 2 gets all the attention. But very quietly, are you noticing that Gervon Dexter is taking that step or has taken a step forward?
I think he is taking a step forward. There's no question about it. You listen to the numbers right there. That's production. It's a production-based business. He's getting to the quarterback. That's why you drafted him, right? And Dan, that was one of your concerns going into week 1. Do the Bears have a 3 technique or interior defensive lineman that can push the pocket and create pressure? not only create pressure, but get home to the quarterback. That's what he's doing right now. I mean, it's a product of this entire defense, too. We've talked about it for a long time, Dan, that if you're going to play too deep and you don't have an interior player that can create pretty consistent disruption, you're going to have a hard time. And Dexter is doing that right now for the Bears.